Daniel Carter had always believed that life was predictable as long as you controlled every variable. And control was something he mastered. At 32, he had built Carter Financial Systems, the fastest-growing fintech company in the Pacific Northwest. Contracts, deadlines, meetings, numbers, every piece of his existence obeyed order and discipline. No excuses, no weaknesses, which is why sitting inside the glass-walled corner office on the 42nd floor of Sky Peak Tower in downtown Seattle, Daniel's jaw tightened as he stared at a red-highlighted name on his HR report: Maria Lopez housekeeping staff. 3 consecutive absences. No notice. Unacceptable. Maria had been with him for 4 years, hired because she was quiet, consistent, and invisible. She arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, never missed a day, never spoke unless spoken to, and never crossed boundaries. She was a background detail in Daniel's carefully curated life, and now she had broken the rules. He picked up his phone, already rehearsing the dismissal in his head. Calm, distant, decisive. Maria, your lack of communication indicates a disregard for professional standards. Effective immediately. But when the call connected, the voice on the other end wasn't Maria at all. It was a child, a tiny, shaking child. "Sir, please don't hang up," the boy cried. "My mom won't wake up. She has blood in her mouth." Daniel froze. The city outside Elliott Bay, glimmering beneath the fading afternoon sun, blurred into nothing. His entire mind stalled, unable to process what he had just heard. The cold, calculated speech evaporated instantly. "Slow down," he said, standing so abruptly his chair hit the wall. "What's your name?" "My name is Eli," the boy whispered between trembling breaths. "I'm 5. Mom told me if anything bad ever happens to answer the phone." "Sir, she's really cold." A spike of adrenaline hit Daniel so hard he had to grip the edge of his desk. "Eli, listen to me. Is your mom breathing? I think so. But she makes a scary sound, like bubbles." A wet, rattling gasp echoed faintly through the phone. Daniel's blood iced over. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He simply grabbed his keys, shoved his laptop aside, and sprinted out of the office, past confused assistants, down the elevator, and into the parking garage. "Tell me your address," he said, breathless, as he reached his silver BMW. Eli recited it exactly as his mother must have taught him: Pinecrest Avenue, Rainview District, apartment 3B, above the little grocery store. A low-income area Daniel had never once driven through, not in his entire life. "You're doing great," Daniel told him. "I'm calling 911 and I'm coming to you. Stay on the phone with me." Traffic in Seattle was a nightmare, especially near the waterfront at 5 p.m. But Daniel drove like a man possessed, cutting through lanes, ignoring honking, whispering reassurances to the terrified child clinging to the line. "Sir, I'm scared," Eli sobbed. "I can't call my dad. He left a long time ago." Something in Daniel's chest cracked. A place he didn't know still existed. "I'm here," he said softly. "I won't leave you. Just keep talking to me." 35 agonizing minutes later, Daniel screeched onto Pinecrest Avenue. His BMW did not belong there, between flickering streetlights painted over graffiti, the rattle of an old bus engine nearby, and neighbors who paused mid-conversation to stare. He didn't care. He ran up the cracked stairway 2 steps at a time until a tiny figure appeared in the doorway of apartment 3B. The boy was even smaller than Daniel imagined, dark hair, oversized t-shirt, bare feet on the cold tile. His cheeks were wet, his eyes huge. "Are you Daniel?" he whispered. Daniel crouched instantly, eye level, something he had never done with any child before. "Yes, I'm here. Where's your mom?" Eli took Daniel's hand, a desperate, instinctive grab, and pulled him into the cramped studio apartment. There, on a thin mattress laid directly on the floor, lay Maria Lopez, the quiet woman who cleaned his penthouse twice a week, the woman he had barely spoken 10 full sentences to in 4 years, the woman he had intended to fire just 1 hour earlier. Now she was pale as paper, lips tinged blue-dried blood at the corner of her mouth. For the first time in years, Daniel felt fear that wasn't about profit or reputation. It was fear for another human being. "Her pulse is weak," he muttered, checking her neck with trembling hands. "Will she die?" Eli sobbed. Daniel swallowed hard. "Not if I can help it." Sirens wailed outside. Paramedics rushed in. They worked quickly. Oxygen IV lines whispered codes Daniel didn't understand. Their faces were grim. "We need to transport her immediately," one said. "Blood pressure dangerously low, severe dehydration, possible internal bleeding." "Can I come?" Eli begged, clutching Daniel's pant leg. The paramedic hesitated. "He'll need a guardian." Daniel didn't think. "He's with me." The words came out steady, instinctive, shocking even to himself. They rode together in the ambulance, Daniel gripping the boy's shaking hand, while the city lights streaked by, turning Seattle into a blur of blue and white. At Evergreen Medical Center, chaos exploded, stretchers, nurses shouting, intercoms blaring, but Eli stuck to Daniel like a shadow, refusing to let go. Daniel had no idea how he ended up sitting in a plastic hospital chair with a little boy curled against him. He had no idea how his perfectly calculated life had unraveled in one phone call. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He wasn't leaving this child. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity before a doctor finally approached them. Mr. Carter. Daniel straightened. "Yes, I'm Dr. Mark Holloway. We stabilized Maria, but..." He paused, weighing his words. "Her condition is very severe." Eli's small fingers dug into Daniel's arm. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, voice low. "She's suffering from advanced malnutrition, severe anemia, dehydration, and we're running tests for possible tuberculosis. Someone has been ignoring symptoms for months, maybe years." Daniel felt the room tilt. He had walked past Maria 100 times, seen her cough, seen her tremble slightly, seen her move slower lately, and he'd never asked why. Never cared enough to wonder. But Eli knew. "My mom works too much," the boy said quietly. "She gives me all the food first. She says she can eat later, but sometimes she doesn't." Daniel's heart clenched so sharply he had to look away. This wasn't just sickness, it was sacrifice. A mother's endless, invisible, brutal sacrifice, and he had been too blind to see any of it. As Eli slowly fell asleep against his side, Daniel looked around the sterile waiting room, realizing that a life he thought he controlled completely had just shifted beneath his feet. He didn't know it yet, but this night would change everything. His values, his priorities, his future, and most of all, his heart. Because sometimes the universe doesn't ask permission before it breaks your world apart. It just hands you a child's trembling voice on the other end of the line and dares you to become someone new. Daniel barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Maria's pale face, her trembling breath, the dried blood at the corner of her lips. And each time the memory of Eli's tiny voice whispering, "Please don't leave me," jolted him awake. By dawn, the hospital waiting room lights flickered from their night mode, dim to the pale gray of early morning. Nurses shuffled paperwork, the coffee machine sputtered in the corner, and through the glass windows of Evergreen Medical Center, the misty Seattle sky hung low and heavy. Eli was curled beside him on the chair asleep, with his head pressed against Daniel's ribs, his hand still clutching Daniel's sleeve, as if letting go would make the world collapse. Daniel had built an empire from nothing. He had learned to face aggressive investors, collapsing deals, the pressure of running a multi-million-dollar company. But holding this fragile child at the worst moment of his life made him feel more responsible and more terrified than any board meeting ever had. When a nurse finally approached them, Daniel gently shook Eli awake. "Sweetheart," she said softly, kneeling beside the boy, "your mom is asking for you." Eli blinked hard, disoriented and afraid. Daniel lifted him into his arms and followed the nurse down the hallway, lined with beeping monitors and exhausted families. When they entered the room, Maria was propped up slightly on the bed, surrounded by tubes and medical equipment. Her skin was still gray, but her eyes opened the moment she heard her son's voice. Mama Eli burst into tears as he scrambled out of Daniel's arms and onto the bed. Maria hugged him weakly, her fingers trembling as she stroked his hair. "My baby, you were so brave," her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." Daniel stepped closer, his throat tightening. Seeing this small family, one he'd known only from a distance, now breaking apart in front of him, made something inside him twist painfully. Maria looked up at Daniel, shame flickering in her eyes. "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry. I didn't call. I couldn't breathe." Maria stopped, Daniel said gently. Your job is not important right now. You just need to get better." Her lips trembled. "I never wanted to be a burden. I know I should have told someone, but I didn't want you to think I was weak. I didn't want to lose my job. Eli depends on me." Daniel swallowed hard. How many times had he seen her fatigue and simply dismissed it? How many times had she walked past him quietly cracking under a weight he never bothered to see? "But you're not weak," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "You've been carrying everything alone. No one could survive that." Maria wiped her eyes. "I didn't have a choice." He nodded. "You do now." A sudden knock on the door interrupted them. A doctor walked in, Dr. Mark Holloway, holding a tablet and wearing a grave expression. "Maria, we have your full results," he said. "Your condition is serious. You have advanced tuberculosis, severe anemia, and extreme malnutrition. You'll need long-term care medication and close monitoring. This is going to be a long recovery." Maria closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "How long?" "A minimum of 6 months before you're stable. Possibly longer if complications arise." Eli clung to her, terrified. Maria whispered, 6 months. But who's going to take care of him? I can't." Her voice cracked, dissolving into sobs. "I can't lose my son." Daniel stepped forward without hesitation. "He'll stay with me." Maria froze, lifting her eyes slowly, as if she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. "Mr. Carter, you don't have to do that." "I know," Daniel replied, voice steady. "But I want to." Her shoulders trembled. Why would you help us?" A simple truth came out before he could even think of softening it. "Because he needed me, and because I failed to see how much you were suffering. I won't make that mistake again." Maria covered her mouth, tears spilling freely, overwhelmed. Eli looked between them with wide, hopeful eyes. "Sir, would I really stay with you?" he whispered. Daniel knelt beside the bed so he was eye level with the little boy. "Yes, Eli. As long as you need, I'll take care of you." For a moment, Maria just stared, unable to comprehend the shift in her fate. The rigid, unreachable CEO she worked for, the man who had barely noticed her existence, was now the person holding her son's future in his hands. Before she could speak, the door opened again. This time a woman stood there wearing a state badge. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, calm energy. "Mr. Carter," she asked. "I'm Sandra Mitchell from Child Protective Services. The hospital notified us due to the severity of Maria's condition." Maria stiffened. Eli grabbed Daniel's arm. Sandra continued gently. "We're here to assess temporary guardianship for Eli while his mother undergoes treatment." Daniel's jaw clenched. "He's staying with me." Sandra looked at him carefully. "Mr. Carter, temporary guardianship requires a full background check, home evaluation, and a legal agreement. You can't simply decide to take him." "Then start whatever you need to start," Daniel said firmly. "I'm not leaving this boy alone." Sandra studied him, measuring the truth in his voice. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Then let's sit down and talk." They moved to a small consultation room where Daniel filled out forms, answered questions, signed documents, and listened as Sandra explained the process. The more she spoke about temporary custody, legal obligations, and assessments, the more Daniel realized something startling. He didn't feel overwhelmed. He felt steady, focused, clear. When they returned to Maria's room, Sandra spoke gently to her. "Maria, your son needs a stable environment until you're recovered. You can choose who takes him. Do you feel comfortable with Mr. Carter, assuming that role temporarily?" Maria took a long breath, her eyes drifting to Daniel, this man she barely knew yet, who held her son like he had been doing so his whole life. "I trust him," she whispered, "more than anyone else." Sandra nodded. "Then we'll move forward." Eli immediately threw his arms around Daniel's waist, relief washing over his small frame. For the first time since the nightmare began, he felt anchored. Later that evening, when Maria drifted to sleep, Daniel carried Eli down the dim hospital hallway toward the exit. The boy rested his head on Daniel's shoulder, exhausted but no longer trembling. Outside, the Seattle air was cold and damp, but Daniel didn't feel it. Eli's small arms around his neck felt like a weight and a purpose he didn't know he had been missing all his life. As Daniel buckled Eli into the car seat he had just bought from the hospital's emergency store, he saw the child's tired eyes watching him with something close to trust. "Mr. Carter," Eli murmured softly, "am I really going home with you?" "You are," Daniel answered. and you're safe with me. I promise." As he closed the car door, a strange feeling settled quietly into his chest. Not fear, not responsibility. Something deeper. Something that felt dangerously close to belonging. Now that you've seen Daniel take Qley into his life, I want to ask you something that connects directly with what just happened. Daniel didn't realize how much his life had changed until the next morning, when he walked into his penthouse and found Qley standing barefoot in the middle of the marble kitchen, staring up at the ceiling like he had stepped into another universe. The boy didn't touch anything. He didn't move. He barely breathed. He just looked around with a mixture of wonder and fear. "Is this really your house?" Qley whispered. "It's our house for now," Daniel said gently. "You'll stay here until your mom gets better." Qley nodded slowly, clutching the small blue backpack he'd refused to leave at the hospital. Inside, there were only 2 shirts, a toy dinosaur, and a picture of him and his mother drawn in crayon. Daniel felt something unfamiliar hit him in the chest, something warm, heavy, protective. He showed Qley the guest room, helped him into pajamas, made him warm mac and cheese, and kept the lights low so the child wouldn't feel overwhelmed. Qley stuck close to him the entire night, following him from room to room like a little shadow. When it was finally time for bed, the boy hesitated before climbing under the blankets. "Mr. Carter," Qley murmured, "can you stay until I fall asleep?" Daniel sat on the edge of the bed and waited. It didn't take long. Qley's breathing slowed. His eyelids dropped and his hands, small and soft, remained wrapped around the sleeve of Daniel's shirt. Only when the boy was fully asleep did Daniel gently slip his hand free. But just as he reached the door, he looked back and didn't know why the sight hit him so hard. Qley, tiny in the middle of a large guest bed, hugging a stuffed dinosaur like it was the only thing keeping him safe. Something inside Daniel shifted, settling in a place he didn't know existed. This wasn't temporary anymore. He knew it even if he hadn't said it out loud. The next 2 weeks were a blur of work, hospital visits, CPS interviews, and comforting a little boy who had been brave for far too long. Qley slowly grew comfortable enough to laugh, but he still woke up crying some nights, whispering for his mother. Each time Daniel was there, and each time Daniel felt the walls of the life he once lived crumble a little more. But peace never lasts long. On a gray Seattle afternoon, just as Daniel was preparing lunch for Qley, his phone rang. When he saw the number from the building concierge, he felt a familiar tension in his shoulders. "Mr. Carter," the concierge said urgently, "there's a man downstairs demanding to come up. He says he's Qley's father." Daniel felt his blood run cold. Travis. He'd known the man would eventually show up. Men like that always came back, but never for the right reasons. "I'm coming down," Daniel said, his voice sharp. He turned to Qley, who had heard enough of the conversation to know something was wrong. The child's eyes widened with pure terror. "No," Qley whispered. "Please don't let him take me. He hurts my mom. He yells. He smells like the cans people throw away." Daniel knelt, holding the boy's shoulders. "Listen to me. You're safe. I promise you, he's not taking you anywhere." Qley clutched him desperately, his whole body shaking. "Don't let him take me, please." Daniel stood jaw-locked and went downstairs. Travis Cole looked exactly like the kind of man who showed up after vanishing for years, disheveled, smelling of stale beer. Eyes red, voice loud enough to fill the marble lobby. "Where's my son?" he shouted. "I want him now." "No," Daniel said simply. Travis staggered closer. "He's my kid, rich boy. You can't keep him." "What you call keeping," Daniel replied quietly. "I call protecting." Travis sneered. "If you don't hand him over, I'll report you. Ever heard of kidnapping charges, Mr. Moneybags?" Before Daniel could respond, a calm voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Cole, I need to speak with you." Sandra Mitchell from CPS walked in holding a manila folder. Travis paled. She had paperwork, photos, police reports, signed statements from neighbors. Travis's history of violence, negligence, and abandonment was laid out in black and white. Within minutes, he realized he had lost. And as he was escorted out by building security, he threw one last desperate threat. "This isn't over, Carter." But they all knew it was. For the first time in his life, Travis had met someone stronger than his rage, Daniel. That night, Qley fell asleep on the couch while watching a movie, curled against Daniel's side. Daniel didn't move him to the bed. He just sat there, the weight of the boy's tiny trust pressing against his chest in a way no business victory ever had. 2 days later, Maria was strong enough for a short conversation. Sitting beside her hospital bed, Daniel took a deep breath. "Maria," he said softly, "I need to ask you something important." She looked at him, already sensing the gravity in his tone. "These past weeks with Eli, they've changed everything for me. That boy isn't just someone I'm helping." Daniel paused, steadying his voice. "He's someone I love, someone I want to protect, someone I want to raise." Tears filled Maria's eyes instantly. "You want to adopt him?" Daniel nodded. "Only if you agree. I'm not taking him away from you. I want to give him a future education, safety, health. And you will always be his mother. I just want to be the father he deserves." Maria covered her mouth and cried silently. "I prayed for this," she whispered. "Every night I prayed someone good would love my son the way he deserves." She took Daniel's hand. "If you promise to love him, then yes, I give you my blessing." The adoption process was long filled with hearings, evaluations, and Travis's final pathetic attempts to disrupt everything. But the truth was too strong. The judge granted full custody to Daniel. When Daniel walked out of the courthouse, holding Eli's hand, the boy looked up at him. "Does this mean you're really my dad now?" Daniel scooped him up, voice thick. "Yes, Eli. I'm your dad." "Forever?" the boy asked. "Forever." Months later, their home looked completely different. Toys everywhere. A messy fridge covered with drawings. Laughter echoing through rooms once cold and silent. Daniel's life was no longer built from spreadsheets and schedules. It was built from bedtime stories, scraped knees, shared breakfasts, and the soft weight of a child sleeping on his shoulder. One night as Eli worked on a school project about planets, he said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Someone who helps people." Those words felt like someone placing a second heartbeat inside Daniel's chest. He realized then that nothing in his life, not the money, not the awards, not the towering office building, would ever compare to what he had now. A son, a family, a purpose. And all of it began with a phone call he never expected. Now that we've reached the end of this journey, I want to ask you something while we're still inside the emotion of this story. Did you feel that Daniel truly deserved this second chance at becoming a father? If this story touched you, comment 100 below. And I would love to know from which country are you watching this. Share this story if you think more people should feel what real love and humanity look like.